What a way to make a living. Crypto is on the rise, making that dough in the crypto paradise. Watching it go, buying low, selling high. Riding the wave, I'm here to stay, living in the digital age. No banks, no fees, just decentralized. It's crypto paradise. Ooh. No banks, no fees.
Alrighty, good morning from Paradise Surfers. Happy Monday, December 15th. My name is Crypto Amaru, joined as always by your boy, the Hitman Nick Stradamus. Happy to be here with you guys. Got some good stories for today. Bulls versus Bears, baby. That's the tension. That's the fight right now as we lead into 2026. The 4-year cycle still alive and well, or are we shifting to a 5-year cycle? That's the debate. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll get into that. We will get into some other good stories that we have for you guys today. But before that, we must know, Nick, how was your weekend, good sir?
Weekend was pretty good. Nothing too much going on. It's really cold here, so we did a little bit around the house. But we did go to this new place called Lava Island, which is like a kid's bouncy park. They have trampolines and stuff. But they also have like jungle gyms, you know, like the ones that used to be in all the McDonald's, except way bigger scale to the point where adults could fit in. So you can bet I put on my sticky socks and I was running around through there, hammering out some kids, you know, going down the slides. It is what it is. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, beating kids up on a Saturday afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. That is how we roll at Crypto Paradise. Yeah, I do want to talk about the phenomenon of these jumping places and these like kids' fun houses. I feel like we were deprived growing up because these did not exist when I was a kid. And now there's like 30 of them in like probably a 10-mile radius of my house. It seems like we're at one every weekend for a birthday party.
I remember trampolines back when we were kids were the circle ones with the metal springs on it that if you missed your step, you tore your leg up. So I think maybe it was the technology. But it seems like a pretty good business because a parent has to pay to go in whether they want to jump or not. So for a full day for me, the wife, the kid, plus socks, it was like $48. Well, then if you're running around in there jumping around, well, you're going to buy something. They sell water for $3 a bottle. They buy it for 20 cents. They sell smoothies for $5. Probably cost them $1. They sell pizzas. They sell burgers. So if you're paying $48 for all day jumping, you're going to stay there for at least one meal as well. So I think it was like $100 and something a day. And really, what was their overhead? A couple kids making $10 an hour maybe? I don't know.
Great business. Yeah, great business. And don't bother inquiring how much it'll cost to host a birthday party there.
Right.
You'll be spending $700-800 real quick to host, your kid and his group of friends. So anyway, I digress. Glad to hear your weekend went well. Mine was pretty good. I'm a bit tired. Had a friend over, just did a lot of stuff. My Eagles won yesterday in dominating fashion, so I'm riding high off that victory. The market's looking a little shaky, a little iffy here, and you sort of have to wonder, who's to blame? Who's the boogeyman? Or is this just your normal chop, your normal sort of weekend, low liquidity, low volume sort of price action?
Well, I mean, we see this wick here, but I only see this on Bitfinex. I even made a tweet about it. So this only popped up on Bitfinex. So I don't know if they were manipulating, if this was just an error in their system or what, but nowhere else did Ethereum get this low. Nowhere else did Ethereum get lower than this $3,000 mark, which still puts in another higher low for Ethereum. We've rallied into Sunday night, and now we're waiting to see what's going on here with the stock market today as we opened 15 minutes ago. But, I mean, we're still chopping, still higher lows, and we're in between the 200 moving average and the 300 moving average. Hopefully, this 300 moving average is the magnet. We can continue to work higher towards $3,600, $3,700. If we look at Bitcoin, similar story here. Bitcoin looks a little bit weaker percentage-wise, but again, we had the sell-off. Didn't go to a new low, so we're holding higher lows, and now we're chopping just below the 200 moving average, but above this buy zone that we had on this chart for months and months and months. So we'll see what happens. Ethereum continues to outpace Bitcoin, It isn't pretty because we're not going to the moon, but we've been talking about how Ethereum is going to outperform Bitcoin. That's the place to be, and so far that is happening. We want to see Bitcoin get out of this range, get in between this yellow line and red line like we see with Ethereum to continue to show a little bit of strength.
Yeah, I do think Ethereum will continue to outperform Bitcoin in the latter half of this cycle. That being said, I want to see Bitcoin do well, not just simply because I hold Bitcoin, but because I don't think you can have a sustained alt season if Bitcoin is just kind of languishing below 100K or below its all-time high. Every time we've seen an altcoin run this cycle, it's kind of been on the back of Bitcoin's strength. And I know you could say, all right, well, it's more of Ethereum that matters more for altcoins, which is probably true, but Bitcoin also matters. So rooting for Big Daddy Bitcoin here. I think we just continue to chop through the end of the year. I don't know what's going to cause it to sort of reignite back towards over 100,000. We'll see. Maybe it'll just spontaneously happen for no apparent catalyst. We got like a couple more weeks here. My expectations for end of 25 are relatively subdued, and I'm kind of looking out ahead till 2026 for some more explosive price action on Bitcoin and ETH.
All the stock indices, the Dow Jones, the S&P 500, the Nasdaq are all slightly green, all up about 0.25% for the day. Ethereum and Bitcoin are still well, Bitcoin is up 0.9% for the day, and Ethereum is up 0.63. I was about to say they're negative for the day, but I guess they just look a little ugly due to the weakness that we saw early Sunday, and that kind of resolved itself by the end of Sunday close. Nothing else really going on. Everything is plus or minus 1%, 2%, 3%. Nothing explosive going on, and I don't think much is going on Pulse Chain either. The same thing. Pulse PLS is down in the past 24 hours, 2.9%. PLSX down 5%. Inc 3, and Hex 3. So nothing much going on in the markets, but we do have some news that we'll talk about here. JP Morgan going from telling you never to touch blockchain technology, Ethereum, Bitcoin, all rat poison to now JP Morgan, JPM, starts tokenized money market fund on Ethereum to seed fund on ETH with 100 million internal capital. We do know JP Morgan gets fined more than $100 million a year because they're all scumbags. But hey, if they're going to use $100 million, at least they're putting on the Ethereum network. What do you think about this, Crypto Amaru?
I think it's a major story that hasn't yet reflected in the price. And we've seen numerous similar such stories of Wall Street continue to adopt sort of the architecture of blockchain technology, primarily on Ethereum or Ethereum L2s. So I do think it's big news. Obviously, price is being suppressed or whatever's going on here. It's not reflecting the price of ETH, but that's okay. I mean, this is something that you look for as a long-term trend rather than a, quick catalyst here for quick price action. But yeah, happy to see it. I mean, I know people have been critical of JP Morgan. We've certainly been critical of JP Morgan and Jamie Dimon, et cetera. But if they're going to adopt blockchain and they're going to buy Ethereum and they're going to tokenize assets and put it on ETH or deploy stable coins on ETH, this is a good thing. This is a positive thing. So it's kind of funny how a few years ago Jamie Dimon was saying blockchain's useless, Bitcoin's pet rock, blah blah blah, whatever he was saying, and now here they are adopting it. There you go.
Yeah, and we see institutions, not just JP Morgan, adopting in a big way. Bullish news. Well, we can debate if it's bullish or not. Bitcoin institutional holdings reach 5.94 million Bitcoin, nearly 30% of the circulating supply across all exchanges, ETFs, public companies, and governments. And it's probably even more than 30% because I don't think they're taking into account the Satoshi wallets that haven't moved in forever because Satoshi himself is probably dead or those tokens have been lost, most likely dead. Doesn't take into effect the people who have lost their hard drives in the dumps, still looking for them, can't find them, and so many other Bitcoin that were lost in the early days. So I would say that this is probably actually 35 to 40% of the circulating supply that is being bought up, held, and controlled by ETFs, public companies, and governments. What do you think? Do you think this is a good thing or a bad thing? Do you think this trend continues, or do you think retail ever comes back into this market and starts eating up some of them Bitcoin?
Retail will be back. Retail will be back. We've discussed many times what it'll take. Obviously, price go up is really the number one thing, but you need liquidity conditions to improve, et cetera, et cetera. I do want to just reiterate something that you said that I think is lost on a lot of people. I've actually now taken to saying that when I'm talking about Bitcoin, to a stranger or a friend who's not, in the industry, kind of giving them the 30-second elevator pitch. I always now mention, yes, 21 million ever coins can be created, but 4 million have already been lost. And that's actually a conservative estimate. And I don't think it includes the Satoshi coins. So we're talking 4 to 5 million coins that are actually not really a part of the circulating supply anymore at all. It's counting, but they're not really there because they're lost. So we're talking now actually 17 million coins. So yeah, it's something to bear in mind when you're chatting with folks about Bitcoin and crypto. It's like, yeah, 21 million, but actually it's 17 million. So I wanted to reiterate that. But yeah, look, you guys know my stance on institutional adoption. I think it's positive. I think it's nothing but positive. If you want this industry, you want Bitcoin to hit $1 million, you're going to need institutions here. It's as simple as that. And the positive thing about it too is they tend to have a little bit of longer term time horizon than your average retail investor.
Yeah, and I think the most surprising thing on this is not the exchanges. That's good that exchanges are going down. We want to see exchange trend to zero, but because that could spur the supply and demand curve to cause supply shock. If exchanges are low on Bitcoin when retail comes to the market to try to buy them, because remember, most retail can't buy OTC or doesn't have insiders to buy from. They got to buy directly off the liquidity pools on exchanges. That's when prices move up quickly. Just like when prices move down quickly because there's no liquidity on exchanges, people get liquidated, have to close out longs, whatever it may be, and we get that catastrophic drop like we did on 1010. Let's get something like that. God candles to the upside. We haven't seen that in quite a few years, but that did happen in 2013, in 2017, and in 2020. Will that happen again in 2025? Tom Lee still thinks so. I think highly unlikely, but it probably does happen in 2026. Early Q1 2026 would make a lot of sense. We see that the Bitcoin treasury balances for government, this is the most surprising thing to me, continues to go higher, barely, just kind of stair-stepping. We know that the big narrative was, oh my gosh, El Salvador is already buying 1 Bitcoin a day every single day, plus splurging here and there. The United States has 200,000 Bitcoin, but they want to buy more. They want a Bitcoin strategic reserve, right? And we got some of the Saudi Arabia, Qatar buying up some Bitcoin supply, but it isn't creating or depicting consistent buy pressure from governments hoarding Bitcoin off the open markets. Part of the reason is, here in the United States, for example, they haven't figured out a net neutral way or haven't gotten approved a net neutral way to actually add to Bitcoin rather than confiscating it. El Salvador is still buying 1 Bitcoin a day, but that doesn't really show up in this chart when you have governments like Germany and other European governments that, as they hoard them, retrieve them, confiscate them, they're just selling them on the open market because they don't have the Bitcoin standard set in place yet. We know that, Germany sold billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin, and other countries in Europe is also selling them on a 45-day turnaround. So, to me, the most surprising thing in this chart is that this government one isn't following suit with the blue, the green, and kind of moving up and to the right as we progress through this market cycle.
I wouldn't expect the adoption from a nation-state standpoint to be linear. There's going to be stops and starts. I think the decision makers in a lot of these countries, they're susceptible to FOMO, just like any other investor, just like your average retail investor. And so my expectation, here's the proof: gold. And we know that nation states have been buying and holding gold in their own strategic reserve for decades now, but it really accelerated. They started to buy more when the price was going up, and that sort of spurred more buyers. And if you do some research on the recent run, it was driven a lot by nation states, China in particular, rather than your average Joe who's running out to wherever to buy a ounce of gold. So the nation states, they can feel FOMO just like the rest of us. And my guess is when you start to see Bitcoin finally sort of break out of this downtrend here, run back up towards all-time highs, you start to see some nation states buying in and making those announcements and spurring more FOMO.
Yeah, and here's the gold chart. We have not hit a new high since we did the rotation video back here. Remember, after this top was created, this drop-off caused a massive surge in Bitcoin from like 80-something thousand to $116,000, leading right into the liquidity crisis on Bitcoin a week or so after that. So you really don't want gold to go to new all-time highs. It doesn't kill you. I don't think it runs away here just because where the indicators are, they're already pretty high on the tech. They're pretty high on the RSI. And you got what could be a bearish cross here on the 200 moving average and 300 moving average if gold puts a couple red days together. But we do know when gold is rising, this puts a little bit of pressure on Bitcoin. When gold is dumping after a major euphoria run, that eases the valve on Bitcoin, and people do rotate from gold to Bitcoin. We saw it back here. We saw it back here. Remember, this is when Bitcoin was ripping, when gold was doing nothing, and after it hit its high and just kind of went sideways. Could we get the same action here? That would be nice to see, and I know that's what Thomas Lee and Raul Paul and some of these people are thinking, because again, this also puts pressure on the ISM. And Bitcoin has been following the ISM cycle after cycle. ISM still sitting in the 40s, really needs to get into the high 50s or even the 60s before we really call it a top in the business cycle, and that would probably be a top on Bitcoin, which is more towards 244,000 Bitcoin. So let's see what happens with gold here. Does it break out to new highs? Still hasn't done it. But again, this Pico top, this euphoria run for gold, ended up being the exact low on Bitcoin before a big run. As this dumped, Bitcoin ran from the 80s to $116,000, and remember, that was only about 2 months ago.
Yeah, the correlation between Bitcoin and gold is alive and well. This run on gold over the past, say, month or so, more of a slow grind up rather than like a euphoric run, has been interesting because the media hasn't talked about it. It hasn't really been in the news. It hasn't been that euphoric. It's kind of just been a slow grind, which I don't hate that. I don't hate that at all. I think it's indicative of the environment that we're in, the expectation of further rate cuts. You know, the trade sort of against the U.S. dollar, and that ultimately will benefit Bitcoin. We need to see some rotation, and we need to see maybe some of these big players stopping dumping Bitcoin on our heads every day.
Isn't it interesting? Right here, from this red line up to this top, so it's only a few days there, and you got a double top, so maybe you got a week and a half of these price range. This was pure euphoria, popping up on your Facebook, your TikTok, people lining up around the corners at the gold and bullion shops selling out online. But now you're right back to these same price levels, and like I said, nobody's really talking about it. It's funny how FOMO works. This is a prime example of why we don't have FOMO or new retail in the crypto market yet. We haven't had a sustainable run. Look at the run in gold. Look how many months you had of this, and the FOMO really started here. Between 4,000 to 4,400 was the FOMO. But they had a run from 3,300, grinding up from August all the way to the top in October. Months and months and months of a parabolic move before the FOMO, the news, the lines around the corner started at the Pico top. We have not had a sustainable rally in Bitcoin or ETH or altcoins like that since probably 2021.
Yeah, I mean, research is clear that it takes 3 months of an uptrend for your average retail to start getting excited and buying into an asset. And that's because your average retail, they don't really like to take risks. They want to feel like it's a sure thing. It's definitely going to, it's gone up for this long, it's definitely going to keep going up. And of course, they're always wrong on that because they buy in normally at the top, so then it reverses. But it takes 3 months of an uptrend in most cases, right? And we just haven't seen that on Bitcoin, Ethereum, any altcoins really. I know BNB had a little run there. Bitcoin's been kind of slowly grinding up, and then, big correction around 10, of course. So, retail's nowhere to be found. I'm sure if we were to do a search right now on, retail interest, Google searches, right? That's the proxy for retail interest. We're probably at, the lows or around the lows. So look, this is where we're at, guys. It hasn't been fun. It hasn't been easy. But I guess the real question is, whose fault is it?
Well, there's more and more data coming out that Wintermute and other big market makers are dumping millions of Bitcoin and Ethereum every minute, every day, every month since the 10/10 liquidity crisis that we saw exactly about 2 months ago. They sold $1 billion of Bitcoin and 300 million of ETH and keep dumping more. What is going on? Well, we do know that Thomas Lee was talking a lot about during that liquidity crisis that a market maker or a series of market maker and exchanges got behind on the books, meaning they really had holes in their books there that needed to get filled, and the best way to fill that is on that relief rally to take profits, skim profits, and sell into the market to get your holes in your cash positions proper for your clients, for your own books, for your exchange, for your business, whatever it may be. And that seemingly is what's been going on, and that's what's been putting continuous pressure on Bitcoin and Ethereum ever since October. Even after its big relief rally after the 1010 liquidity crisis, what happened? Immediately got sold off, got stuck, and we've been continuing downward. Yes, we're grinding higher, but remember, we're still around this 89,000, 90,000 level. Not much off the highs, when the all-time highs seem like a far cry away at 126,000, which happened in early October.
That's a very good point. The fact that Bitcoin is still pretty close to $100,000. And you're 4 or 5 years ago, that would have been almost impossible to even envision it be $100,000. And yet here we are. And the sentiment is this low. We're basically, we were at max fear a few weeks ago. I think we're a little bit off of that now. But people are acting like the world's coming to an end and Bitcoin's at zero. But here we are, just a little bit below 100K. So I think it pays to have a bit of a perspective there. But I do think there's some credence to this story or these rumors or speculation that Wintermute, they got liquidated or lost a lot of money on 1010, and they've had to sell their assets to cover some of those losses. I think there's something to that because this isn't just one day. And we haven't talked about this story much, but this is not the first time this story has popped up on my feed, your feed, all our feeds. And I think Thomas Lee, who, now the most important person outside of Michael Saylor from a Wall Street standpoint in the industry, I think he has some insights. And he's been out there saying a market maker basically got liquidated on 1010, and my guess is it was Wintermute, and we're seeing the continued results of that as they sell to cover up those holes.
Yeah, as of 24 hours ago, Wintermute has sold over 40% of their total crypto positions, which is pretty crazy to see. Because if Thomas Lee is right, we're right, Joe Lubin, Paul, the ISM, interest rate cuts, whatever, and we continue on into 2026 with good market structure, the low's already in on Ethereum, the low's already near or in on Bitcoin, and we're going to continue to grind higher. They're now out 40 to 42% of their crypto position as of 24 hours ago, and I know they were still selling overnight on Sunday. That's what was causing some of the weakness. So what do you think about that? Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing that Wintermute is kind of flushing out their positions to the open market and market participants are scooping that up?
Well, it's positive to see that Bitcoin price is held up. ETH price is holding up to a large degree. So that is positive. I think we're going to look back on 1010 and in retrospect, because I think it's going to be another month or two of the market sort of chopping and climbing its way out of this. We're going to look back and say, wow, that was a black swan on par with, the FTX implosion. I know the headline might not be as sexy, right? There's no one going to prison over, 1010 in all likelihood. But from a, market structure standpoint and the impact and the fallout, I think it has been as significant. So, those looking for your black swan, I think we already had the black swan. It was 1010. It usually takes a few months, 2-3 months to recover from a liquidation event of that size. In fact, that was the biggest liquidation event I think of all time. So it's going to take us a few months here to climb out of this. And great to see some of the majors holding up. But let's get the weak hands out. That's what I say. And if Wintermute's a weak hand who is over leveraged, sorry guys, I guess you won't be here for the 200K Bitcoin.
We talked about this seemingly like a week or two ago, but now it's circulating because it finally made its way to mainstream media and was talked about in a bigger, broader context. But remember, we talked about this earlier. So yes, we were right on this being a big deal, and now it's finding its way to Fox News, CNBC, and others. The U.S. just unlocked the biggest Bitcoin demand driver in history. Congress just introduced the Bitcoin for America Act. Americans will be able to pay federal taxes in Bitcoin with zero capital gains tax, and every BTC going straight into a national strategic reserve. We were just talking about how is the government not going up and to the right. El Salvador is buying, USA wants to buy, but none of these governments have figured out how to do it in a net neutral way. Well, here is your net neutral way. If you have a lot of Bitcoin or you trade Bitcoin, you own it. At the end of the year, you owe taxes. If you're up on your Bitcoin, instead of selling it and have to pay a capital gains tax and then pay your income taxes, you can use that Bitcoin then you're up on money to pay your income tax and not have to pay the capital gains tax on that. If you do that, you're also pumping your own Bitcoin bags, because why? The U.S. government isn't going to sell those Bitcoin. They're going to stash them in their strategic reserves. So for those Bitcoin whales, this is a great idea. Even if you're a small fish, if you buy Bitcoin now at $88,000, $89,000, and we go to $200,000 and your taxes are due, you could use some of that Bitcoin then you're up on to pay your income tax, which you got to pay anyways, forfeit those capital gain taxes, don't have to pay it, and pump your own bag by growing the U.S. strategic reserve. This is how it all plays together. This is how it could work for you, whether you're a small fry or whether you're a big Bitcoin whale. I know this affects Bitcoin whales and companies more than anyone. Remember, you have a lot of companies sitting on cash, Apple, whoever it may be, Microsoft, who are interested in Bitcoin but can't get their board to vote to actually buy it on the books. It's just the CEOs own it. Well, maybe this is another scratch on a reason why you should own it. Hey, guys, not only do we think that this has asymmetrical risk, goes up over 10% a year, outperforming the stock market, but rather than our cash is only paying us 5%, then 4%, then 3% because interest rates are going down, let's buy some Bitcoin. Let's capitalize on that upside. And then our company doesn't even have to pay on capital gains on that Bitcoin owned, and we can use that to pay off our tax bill at the end of the year as well. And maybe that gets more companies back on board buying up Bitcoin, not just for Bitcoin strategic reserves, but remember there was a time last year where a lot of these companies, when Bitcoin was going up, had interested on putting it on their books as an asset under management for the companies themselves.
I think the Bitcoin for America Act is a huge deal. Let's hope it gets passed. Let's hope this comes to fruition. I mean, there's still a party in Congress that is more or less anti-crypto and anti-Bitcoin, so it's going to take some buy-in from the Democrats. But I do think this is a wonderful first step in the establishment of a legit Bitcoin strategic reserve, from the U.S. And, Nick, you make a great point around the institutional side or business side of it. I don't think it's the end game. Certainly not in my mind for where I want the strategic reserve to be. You want to see it at a place where the U.S. will actually start buying Bitcoin off the open market. And there are net neutral ways to do that. There's many, many ways they can figure that out. But this is a great first step. Let's hope it becomes law. I might even take advantage of myself at some point, right? I mean, so look, if you own Bitcoin and, you're talking about a massive capital gains implication if you're up big, you're holding it for many years. And so this kind of solves that problem for you and then establishes the strategic reserve. And, the U.S. isn't going to sell this stuff. So nothing but positive. Let's hope it gets passed, and let's hope this is just step one. Step two becomes they're buying the Bitcoin off the open market.
Other than that, not a lot of news, and that means a weakness in Bitcoin and crypto. Bitcoin here at $88,000, now flipping from plus 0.5% to minus 0.25% since we've been live. The crypto paradise pump not happening today. I have no more dry powder to smash the green buy button behind the closed doors to cause these markets to pump. That's what always happens when we goes live. Coinbase 254, still holding higher lows. Looking almost for a reset on the RSI, neutral on the technometer. We haven't given an official buyback after selling Coinbase stock all the way up here at $370. Now we're down to $254. Yes, that's over $100 per share. Could be back in your pocket, and we are looking to buy that up on this setup somewhere shortly. We shall see. Ethereum still holding the $3,000 level, down 0.38% from up 1%. We want to get back in between this yellow and red line. Very important to keep building higher and not go lower than these lows of like $2,900 or so. So we'll see how that plays out. GME stock up a percentage. How is SBT and Bitminer doing today? Probably down, but we do have some news on that. Bitminer down 4%, SBT down 4%. That's what you expect when ETH shows weakness. I don't know if this will be updated, but it popped up on my phone. Breaking news. Bitminer bought more Ethereum over the weekend during the dip. Now approaching, nope, it's not on here. They now have 3.94 million ETH, nearing 4 million, which is 4% of the total supply. So they bought nearly another 0.1 million ETH, another 100,000 Ethereum over the weekend during the dip. And they have more cash to keep doing so. I don't think they have $1 billion cash. I think they're closer to probably 800 million or 750 million at this point. But still, 750 million in cash is quite a bit of ETH that needs to be bought, or can be bought, especially when the target is still 5 million ETH, or 5% of the total supply.
The ETH strategic reserve story is just starting out, folks. How long has Michael Saylor been doing this? And by the way, he just bought another near, I think, $1 billion worth of Bitcoin over the weekend, if I'm not mistaken. So he's still going strong over there. But yeah, this isn't going to slow down. We will continue to see these companies accumulate, at least the major ones, over the foreseeable future. I do want to talk about the price performance on the majors for a second, because I don't know if you've seen this story, but apparently over the past week or two, at 10 a.m. Eastern, every weekday, there's been a major sell-off happening. And
That's
again,
right on time. 11 minutes ago.
this is exactly no. It's kind of uncanny. It happened again, and to me, this is more evidence of market maker or market makers needing to sell to cover some sort of leverage payoff, because it just doesn't make sense otherwise that you'd have such structured selling same time 5 days a week, week in, week out, and it happened again today. So
that is interesting timing, and that does make sense for a seller, because remember, that means that the U.S. markets are open. So if you're going to have the Michael Saylors buying, or the Bitminer buying, or the SharpLink buying, or institutional or retail players buying the ETF, they're usually buying those at market opens, which means that they're selling an hour later into any strength that may exist in that market, or any inflows that may have came into the market as well.
it's a great point. Yeah, I just thought that's when their traders woke up and got to work. But yeah, it's probably
all automated. It's probably all automated. They set that up, sell it at whatever time.
True.
You know, just like Bitminer's now saying they went from buying 50,000 ETH a week to now they're buying 100,000 ETH a week because they think the low is in. So there's a lot of automation in that process, and they don't really watch it too much.
Again, I think the fallout from the 1010 liquidation event is, we'll look back and talk about it like it was on par with the FTX implosion. I think it was that significant. Not to, and look, we survived that. We've survived all other market crashes, and we're still hovering around $100,000 Bitcoin. So I don't think it's like, oh my God, Bitcoin's done for, it's going to zero. I mean, no one's saying that. It's just, yeah, we may take another few months to climb up out of this. Got to get the sellers out, got to get the weak hands out, as we say, and we'll eventually recover. But here we are, a lot of automated selling from these market makers, it seems.
Yeah, here's the Bitcoin average cost basis of the U.S. spot ETF deposits, and right now I think that's about $84,000, and you can see every time we've kind of been on this level, we rejected and went to a new high. We saw it happen down here, bullish divergence, new high, and now we're coming down here. I don't want to see a bullish divergence because that means you would have to take out all these lows, but you don't really have room for a bullish divergence, because if that's the case, you would go below that 84,000 and this thesis would break. So you might not need it anymore. You had the liquidation crisis up here. You had Wintermute selling all here, and you've been grinding, putting higher lows in on the market the past month or so. So hopefully we hold these higher lows and we continue to bounce off this like we have every other time. That leads us to a new high, into ISM going up, interest rate cuts, a bullish 2026, the breaking of the 4-year halving cycle, and we get much higher than people anticipate. The only way that happens, or why I think that's possible, is remember we have the tug of war between the 4-year guys and the 5-year guys. And until you convince the 4-year guys that the 4-year cycle is indeed over, they're not going to be redeploying capital. They're ready to go sit on a beach, sit on their hands, go figure out how to make some more money, sit on the cash they have for the next 2 years, and buy a dip on Bitcoin of like $40,000 or $50,000, and Ethereum at $1,200. So the only way that you're going to really get the big momentum push is you got to convince all those guys who sideline their cash, whether they sidelined it down here, they sidelined it here, they sidelined it here. It doesn't matter. A lot of people sold around 100,000 Bitcoin. You needed them to be like, holy shit, maybe the 4-year cycle isn't a thing. Maybe we are on a 5 or even a 6-year cycle. And I don't think that happens until you really break above 110 and really above the 120 to new all-time high levels. That's when you can convince 50% of the market that has already sidelined their cash somewhere on this downturn, thinking, okay, yep, this drop here, this indeed meant we're on a 4-year cycle. I'm feeling good. I sold my Bitcoin at 100K. We're sitting at 90K. I'm going to sit on my hands for 2 years. What do you think about that?
It's definitely going to take Bitcoin being above 100,000 for retail FOMO to come back in. And I think a lot of these ETF investors, they are retail to some degree anyway. So, yeah, it may take a few more weeks here, guys. I want to say good morning to our loyal community members and supporters. Good morning, Nonso. Yeah, we had a good weekend here, I'd like to think. I know it's cold. We got hit with our first snowstorm, which was fun for like 3-4 hours, and then it just gets annoying dealing with all the snow and the ice on the cars, etc. But in any event, good morning, Meek Shabu. Good morning to Jay. Yeah, I mean, look, we have a number of catalysts coming up, at least in the sort of the midterm time horizon here. The next Fed meeting is not till the end of January. January 28th is when they will announce the next rate decision. But of course, there's a ton of data that's going to be dropped between now and then around the labor market and inflation, et cetera. So we'll get some good indication whether the Fed will continue to cut rates here. We want to see that. We want to see further rate cuts. We want to see the Fed continue to buy their short-term treasuries. Who knows? Maybe we get an announcement in the near term around them continuing to enhance or further the quantitative easing, buy more, maybe long-term treasuries, which would drive down the interest rates. We want to see that. We want to see Trump announce the next head of the Fed, right? Someone who's going to be a known dove. So that's supposedly going to be dropping, any day here. He's been saying that for a few weeks now. My guess is we do get it before the end of the year. So give us a couple more weeks for Trump to make that announcement. And then you have the market structure bills and that new Bitcoin Strategic Reserve Act that the Republicans set forth. So a couple of legislative catalysts that could spur things along. But until then, I think we just see chop. It seems like the market makers continue to sell. Yes, institutions are buying, whales are buying, Michael Saylor, Tom Lee, etc. But chop, I think, is the name of the game up until we see a clear direction, hopefully in early 2026 to the upside.
We shall see. I'm just watching the markets over here, guys. Watching to see if there's any kind of news breaking. Not much going on. Let's see what the NASDAQ is doing. NASDAQ is down 0.25%. Dow is down 0.25%. S&P is down about 0.25%. And follow suits is Bitcoin and Ethereum weakness so far. And that's it. I mean, we can stay tuned. We can see what's going on. You don't want to see those major lows give away. For every low taken out on Bitcoin and Ethereum, you're losing the fact of potential higher lows. So those are the levels you need to watch. We've been continuing to say that, so we're going to watch those moving forward here. And again, that chart we just showed says that the ETF inflow cost is about $83,900. That has been major support since inception. So we'll see if that continues to hold as well. Hopefully it does. We're still at 87,250, so we got a long way to go before that comes into play.
Yeah, it's watching and waiting time. It's maybe touch snow time, and get outside, do something else, get away from the charts. Because I just think we're in a choppy period right now. We're sort of in a boredom period. I know the chart doesn't look terrible, but we're kind of teetering on the edge here, as Nick's alluded to. So let's hope we can stay above, the $3,000 mark for ETH. Bitcoin doesn't show some more weakness, but I think we just continue to see some chop throughout the end of the year. You might have some sellers coming in to sell, for tax reasons or whatever that does happen. Some tax harvesting, as it's known. So you may see some of that come into a play. But, zooming out, I think 2026 is our year. We've been on record saying that many, many times around the 5-year cycle, the ISM, Fed rate cuts, etc. So 2026, that's really what I'm looking at here at this point, rather than holding out hope for some, explosive move at the end of 25. Do you think there's any chance we get like a pump, sort of a Christmas Santa Claus rally here, or is that just not?
I mean, I was in favor of a pump at the end of the year, but again, I kept saying that needs to happen by mid-November. So once that didn't happen, that's when you start looking to, okay, let's look at Q1 2026. I didn't think there was going to be a miracle pump in December. But I know Thomas Lee and some of those guys are saying by end of the year, Bitcoin 100,000 or more. Really, I would love for Bitcoin to be 95,000 by the end of the year, because again, we talked about that with MicroStrategy. That puts green on their books for the year to date. It does proof of concept for other companies to follow suit in that. Also, that gives them more raise interest, which means they can buy more Bitcoin early into 2026. So $95,000 Bitcoin is really the target that I would love to see, just for what that does from a macro perspective. And I think 95,000 to 100 is still very possible in 16 days for Bitcoin. But anything above that, I don't know if we're going to just randomly see some God candles.
Yeah, I don't think God candles are in their card for the end of 25, but 95,000 is completely reasonable.
We were just there. We were close. We hit 94.5 December 11th. 4 days ago, we were right there, knocking on the door of 95,000.
Yep. And we wicked up there. Was that the rate decision? No, the rate. I think the rate day was maybe a few days before that. But yeah, I mean, we're right there. We were almost there. I think we'll probably grind back up there, subject to let's see what these market makers do. I mean, if every morning at 10 a.m. they got their sell orders set to execute, and then overnight Wintermute just continues to sell, it's going to be a struggle, bulls versus bears. But eventually, those guys will run out of Bitcoin, and institutions step in. Michael Saylor steps in. And once we get some green candles, that's when retail feels more confident. But we just haven't seen any sustained green. I mean, it's been a little pump here, a little relief rally for a day, an hour, and then bam, right back down.
There's zero retail interest. Whether you look at Google Trends, whether you look at volume on Coinbase, whether you look at volume on decentralized exchanges, whether you look at volume on layer 2s and other layer 1s outside of Ethereum, there's no retail. Volumes are down, liquidity is down, active wallets are down. Whatever metric you like to look for retail, all of those metrics are down or non-existent at this point in time.
I think you and I might be the only bulls left in the market. And Michael Saylor.
That's a retail, I guess. Thomas Lee's not retail anymore. Joe Lubin's not
true.
retail anymore. Rob Paul, maybe, I guess you can count as retail, but he talks to more of an institutional grade, company grade community as well.
Yeah, retail is nowhere to be found. And then, look, when the price action's been as it's been for the past 2 months, this is what you expect. Also, there's been nothing happening in the world of alts. I mean, alts are, forget about even relief rallies. It's just been down and to the right, basically. So I think I saw on X over the past year, 90% of altcoins are down. So 10 are up. 10 out of the top 100 are positive for the year. Rest down, and probably down big. That's no recipe for retail to be excited.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. And those are the top 100. Those are the big dogs. You know what I mean? And if that was the true 4-year cycle bull top, you had 10 of the top 100 crypto assets being in green for the year. And that was as of, a couple days ago. I mean, if you've closed red, Bitcoin's down to 88,000, 87,000 right now. That's probably down to 8 or 7 that are green for the year. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if that was the bull run, if 2024 was the blow-off top, I mean, is that not the worst, most pathetic bull run ever in the history of Bitcoin?
Meanwhile, gold goes to $30 trillion and has people lining up around the corners. Even though percentage-wise it's not that big. For people who are in crypto, I mean, it didn't even do a 2x. But the fact of the matter that gold had a parabolic run, went to a 30 trillion market cap valuation, had people around the corners to spend $4,400 on an ounce of gold when it was 3,000 or even in the 2,000s before that. Meanwhile, Bitcoin and Ethereum in the top 100 had 7 winners on the year. That's pretty crazy.
Human emotions never change. We will always have fear and greed. And you just need the market to spur one emotion or the other. And we haven't seen the green candles to spur on that greed to get retail excited, to cause more green candles and, price go up and we all get rich. It just hasn't happened. Largely due to the fact there's been no real liquidity in the markets. The Fed's finally injecting some liquidity with this QE light. Martin coming into the chat. Good to see you, Martin. Hope you had a great weekend, bud. Someone asked me why I'm so bullish. I told them it's because I didn't see a bull market in the past 4 years. Absolutely. Yeah, right? Like, how can you have a bear? Haven't we already been in a bear market, right? It's like we never had a bull market. We've been bearish. I guess we could just continue to be bearish. I mean, there's no rule that says we can't continue to be bearish for another God knows how long on alts. But normally you wouldn't expect to see a crypto winter unless there was some blow off top and some euphoria. We just haven't had that. So, I guess we'll see, ladies and gents. 2026, we're all betting big on it. Bulls versus bears. Who will be right? Who will be right?
Bears are feeling pretty good today with Bitcoin back down to $86,800 on one red candle. Ethereum down to still holding $2,997. Coinbase, we sold at $370. It's down to $252. That's the only one I don't mind because we can still buy that back. But Bitcoin and ETH, come on, hold yourselves together. Let there be some FUD on Coinbase to get that red bar so we can continue to go higher.
Coinbase is going to be fine. Coinbase is going to be fine. I'm seeing Brian Armstrong doing the rounds at Davos talking about nation-state adoption and strategic reserves and the U.S. passing various laws to further the adoption of crypto. So he's doing what he can. Michael Saylor's doing what he can. Tom Lee's doing what he can. Wintermute, get your shit together.
Right.
Get your shit together. Come on, guys.
Over the
Or
shoulder.
you know what? Don't sell on the books. Like, start doing some OTC. I mean, they probably already have been doing a lot of OTC as well if they're really trying to get rid of their whole stack. But
over
it's just tough to see these
40%.
guys
Over
to get done.
40% of the crypto has been sold so far. Pretty crazy for Wintermute in the little mini alt seasons you had. You know, you had Floki outperformance, you had the little Doge season, this and that. Wintermute was like the golden standard for market makers during the little mini alt seasons that we've had this year, and now they've sold over 40% of their crypto holdings.
That's Binance's market maker. That's the de facto market maker for the entire exchange. Probably made a shit ton of money over the bull period. And then here they are, overexposed on 1010, I guess, and blew up and now having to sell to recover that money for their clients. Not fun to see. Not fun to watch the chop. But Martin's staying positive. We are staying positive as ever. I apologize. I'm just a little tired today. I'm still bullish on crypto. I'm just exhausted from the weekend. But, just, end of the year. Maybe time to touch some snow. What do you think?
I hope not. I only like snow when it's a lot quickly and it's enough to like actually go sledding. When it's just like, an inch or two and it's just muddy slop, that's not enjoyable.
Oh no, we got like 5-6 inches here.
Yeah, I need 6 inches and it not to melt. Because we had our first snow the day after Thanksgiving, but it only lasted one day and then it melted the next day. It was like too warm. So it's like I don't like that. Give me some snow that lasts a couple days, nice and thick. You can actually sled on it or do something.
Oh, we got a straight up winter wonderland out my window.
Nice.
We didn't do sledding yesterday because we had to do other stuff. But kids were out back throwing snowball fight, snowman, all that stuff. So I mean, it's cool, it's fun. I like winter for about like 2 weeks, and I'm like, all right, I'm over it.
Right, it's nice to have the seasonality, but not great when it takes too long. Kind of like the crypto winter that we're seeing right now.
Like the year long. I mean, we've been in a bear market for altcoins for a year. Prove me wrong. Prove me wrong. Other than BNB.
And Ethereum hasn't gone to new highs in 5 years. So that wick that we saw for 30 minutes, that's not a new high for Ethereum, and that doesn't even count.
But at least in 2024, we had a meme season for whatever that was, 6 months, and that was fun. You can make some money, and the retail was excited. We were excited. That was cool. So 2024. That wasn't bad. Like the end of it, right? Was pretty cool. 2025, we've done nothing.
Well, it's pretty wild because Ethereum's low in 2024 was $2,200. It went up to $4,000, and we were able to get a meme season, a little bit of an alt season, whatever. 2025, it's gone from $4,000 down to as low as $1,400. Rallied all the way back to near all-time highs, $4,800, $4,900, $4,600, and we didn't really have near the opportunity in altcoins or meme season or anything like that. Even though Ethereum went up by a bigger percentage from a lower low to a higher high and still couldn't get that follow through. Nobody was really excited, even though people believed that this is a 4-year cycle. Now it's supposed to be the euphoria time. Couldn't even convince people. People were just like, all right, holy cow, I'm happy to just get out here. I'm taking a breather. I'm going to stack up some cash and sit on my hands until ETH goes back down to 1,200 new lows, Bitcoin to 40,000 new lows, and we'll see if those bears are right here sooner rather than later.
2025 has been tough. Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, even during the summer when ETH was going on a nice little run, that was when the strategic reserves were being announced, I think, and Tom Lee was accumulating, was like big news. Everyone was getting bullish. But I don't think alts did anything really. I know some pulse chain assets were doing kind of well at that point, but I don't remember it being like super bullish by any means at any point during 2020. So, look, if we're in for another crypto winter, or a crypto winter, we've already been in a crypto winter for altcoins, guys. That's just a fact. That is just a fact. So we are staying positive over here. We're talking about snow. We're talking about bears. But we know the market will turn around eventually. And we will be vindicated. We will be vindicated. All right, guys, I got to jump onto a call with a client. project called Me3 that we invested in like 2 years ago. Still hasn't launched. Let's see what he has to say. But let's adjourn for today, ladies and gents. Thank you for joining in on the stream. And until next time, we will see you on the beach.